You have a trial like this where the judge is so conflicted he can't breathe. He's got to do his job. And it's not for me, that I can tell you. It's a disgrace. And I mean that. Mother Teresa could not beat those charges, but we'll see. We'll see how we do. It's a very disgraceful situation. Every single legal scholar and expert said this is no case. It shouldn't be brought, and it certainly could have been brought 7 years ago, not in the middle of a presidential election. It was all done by Joe Biden. This judge contributed to Joe Biden, and far worse than that, but I'm not allowed to talk about it because I have a gag order. Far worse than that, by 1,000 times worse than that. The worst I've ever heard, but I can't talk about it. It'll be talked about, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. But it'll be talked about in the history books. What's happening here is weaponization at a level that nobody's seen before, ever. And it shouldn't be allowed to happen. So I'll stay around here. This is 5 weeks. And 5 weeks of really essentially not campaigning, although I took a big lead in the polls over the last few weeks. Something's going on. Because I think the people of this country see that this is a rigged deal. It's a weaponized deal for the Democrats to hit their political opponent. For Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States. He's destroying our country. He's letting millions of people from jails, from prisons, from insane asylums, from mental institutions, drug dealers pour in. Venezuela, if you look at their crime statistics, they've gone down 72% in crime because they're releasing all their criminals into our country because of this horrible president that we have. And then they have a protest of Robert De Niro yesterday. He's a fool. He's a broken down fool standing out there, and he got maggot. He got maggot yesterday. He got a big dose of it. But I just want to say it's a very unfair trial. It should have never happened. If it was going to happen, it should have happened 7 years ago. As you know, Bragg didn't want to bring it. The Southern District didn't bring it. The FEC didn't bring it. This judge didn't even let us use the #1 election attorney. He's making the rules. He doesn't know anything about elections. He doesn't know anything about voting and vote counts. He doesn't know anything about this stuff. That's not his profession. We had the leading election expert in the country, Brad Smith, ready to testify. Wouldn't let him do it. They wouldn't let another gentleman who represented, and you know very well, you saw it. It was the worst I think I've ever seen anyone treated on the stand. Bob Costello, wouldn't let him talk about all of the hundreds of emails that he was sent by a gentleman, another gentleman, who I can't mention because I'm gagged. Every time I speak to you, you ask me simple questions. I'm not allowed to give you the answer because I'm gagged by this judge. But we have a very, very serious problem here. I mean, our country's going bad. And remember, and let me just leave you with this. This is all because of Joe Biden and I don't even think it's him. I don't think he's smart enough to think about it. But it's the people that surround him in the office. They're smart. They're fascists, they're communists, but they're smart. And they're ruining our country. But we're going to win this election. November 5th is going to be the most important day in the history of our country. We're going to take back our country from these fascists and these thugs that are destroying us with inflation and with everything they do, how stupid they are, allowing 15, 16, 17 million people into our country, totally unvetted, totally unchecked. We're going to bring back our nation November 5th. Remember, most important day in the history of our country. In the meantime, this trial is rigged. Thank you.
What happened? You think of yourself more holy than others?
Well, there was former President Donald Trump. Now that the jury is been sent out to deliberate in his hush money trial, let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews. James, look, we heard some of it there, didn't we? Complaining about not being able to call witnesses, saying that Biden is not smart enough to bring it in, but there are fascists and communists around him. And I want to get yours and Julie's take on what Trump first said, that not even Mother Teresa could beat those charges.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out in due course, won't we? 34 charges of the falsification of business records with a view to committing election fraud, concealing from the American public the story that we heard from Stormy Daniels, the porn star who took the stand, who said she had an affair with Donald Trump. And we heard in excruciating detail how They met in his hotel suite, had sex. He was lying on a bed with, in boxer shorts and T-shirts and so on. Details that you can see why he would have wanted to keep from the American public in the days before the 2016 election. That's the prosecution case, that he did that. He falsified the payment that was required to keep Stormy Daniels silent, falsified that, cooked the books, and that is the crime at the heart of all of this. That's the crime that the jury will be focusing on. Donald Trump, I suppose, wants the world at large, the court of public opinion, to focus on matters outside of courtroom number 1530. Joe Biden, the election campaign, polls that show him alive and kicking in the election race, despite all the evidence we have heard in court, rubbishing Robert De Niro. So it appears to be the Trump playbook at play. We saw his sons yesterday giving a press conference. We hear him on a daily basis talking about matters other than court business, the business under scrutiny by 12 members of a jury right now. And that will be the question. Does he succeed in that, whatever the verdict? What will we be talking about in the days after the verdict of a New York jury? That will be Donald Trump's success, whatever happens inside court, if the world, if the electorate at large is talking about matters other than him being the first former president to be criminally convicted.